Okay, so good afternoon, welcome, good morning, good evening, welcome everyone. My name is Sara Pascoletto. I'm really happy to welcome you all to the first webinar organized by the Decade Collaborative Center for Coastal Resilience. Our title for today is Coastal Resilience, Projects and Actions within the UN Ocean Decade. So again, this is our first webinar, not just of this series, but our very first in general webinar in absolute terms. So I'm really excited to have you all here and have you join. We have this series of webinars which we called Coastal Resilience Webinar Series, and we wanted to take this opportunity of organizing these events to present to you our center, the UN Ocean Decade, as well as some of the projects that are part of our network and are contributing to advancing Ocean Decade science in their own context. So just before we go to our speakers, I wanted to talk to you about our agenda. We will have a small welcome from my side. Then we will pass to a general presentation on what the DCC-CR for Decade Collaborative Center for Coastal Resilience is, presented by Andrea Valentini. We will then pass to Emma Needham, who will give us an overview of the UN Ocean Decade and all the UN Ocean Decade initiatives that are currently going on and its activities. And then we will have Vivianne Solis-Weiss, who will present to us her own project. It was one of the very first projects to be endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade, and we thought it was a good example to give as part of our contribution to the Ocean Decade on the coastal resilience side. Then we will have a Q&A, and we will end at 5 o'clock Central European Summertime. Just some directions on how this webinar will work. So we are recording this webinar, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you have any question, you should find a Q&A box on your commands. So please type in your question there. And when relevant, we would kindly ask you to address your question to one of the speakers directly. That will make it easier for us and for the speakers to respond to you as quickly as possible. And then again, the presentations can be made available on our DCC-CR website. Also, I just wanted to mention that this webinar series has been co-organized with CMCC, Foundation Euro-Mediterranean Center for Climate Change. They have been an instrumental part since the beginning of the DCC to create and shape our activities, and we thank them very much for their support today. Without further ado, then, I would introduce to you our first speaker. His name is Andrea Valentini. He's our chief scientist here at the DCC-CR. Andrea, I will leave it over to you.
Thank you very much, Sara. I share my screen now. Okay, that's fine. So, good morning, everybody. I'm Andrea Valentini, and as Sara said, I'm the chief scientist here at the Decade Collaborative Center for Coastal Resilience that is hosted by University of Bologna. And welcome also from my side at this important series of webinars on coastal resilience that we have organized. And we will try to embrace all the different aspects that affect coastal resilience, and in order to go in depth into different topics of this material. So, a little bit of background. So we have to think that the heavy urbanization of the coastal strip in the last century tend to increase the population of the coast, that rises the impressive number of 2 billion people that live within 100 kilometers of the coast. And this with a strong dependence of human population on healthy coastal, marine, and estuarine environments. So these coastal environments provide critical ecosystem services that are essential to human well-being. And the health and the economic development of coastal communities are under serious threat from a range of factors that can be the climate change, the pollution, and other coastal hazards. So that's why coastal resilience is a key issue, because as it has been defined, well, it has different definition depending on if we are talking about the environment, we are talking about the socioeconomic environment, but in general, for our purposes, we define the coastal resilience as the capacity of the socioeconomic and natural systems to cope with coastal risks and hazards by adapting while maintaining the coastal system essential functions. Okay, so this is our basis, our background, on which we founded the center, and we started working with our mission of the centers, that is to strengthen the connection between the new science and technology that is and will be developed in the ocean decade during these 10 years of work of the United Nations through the UNESCO-IOC, and coastal stakeholders implementing innovative co-design practices for coastal resilience. So we want to act and to connect in a very strong way science, technology, and communities. Okay, it's our main objective. So our strategic plan has been divided into main 4 objectives that we have shared together with Decade unit in Paris, and we have to achieve these 4 main objectives. So the first one is improve science information for all. That means that, we have to transform our understanding, improving the monitoring and the prediction systems that are available nowadays, and fill the knowledge gap through coordination of new action. The second one, enhance stakeholder engagement. This is really important to raise awareness from coastal communities to IOC, UNESCO, and its member states about actionable science during the decade. Then we have to promote equitable education. So make the findings of the decade action accessible through training, open access publication, reference catalogs, information tools, and each tool, each system that we allow to reach the communities, the local communities. And finally, uphold environmental justice for coastal communities. So conduct a thorough literacy review and field work on selected cases in the global south. So our main attention to the global south. How are we acting now in about these 4 main objectives? So regarding the first one, so improve science information for all, we are drafting a white paper on that we call the future of coastal resilience, that will collect the state of the art of coastal resilience in the world. And a second tool that we are designing and we are starting to implement is the Knowledge Hub for Coastal Resilience. That will be a platform, a web platform, through which we will be able to link directly the science, the technology, and the outcome of the ocean decade to the local communities through a narrative communication. Okay. So trying to find out which are the most effective communication system in order to be able to transmit and to communicate in an efficient way. Regarding the stakeholders engagement, we are performing newsletter, webinars, surveying coastal hazard, and we are mapping all the stakeholders that are spread on the globe, because we will have to work together with them in order to share experience and transmit and link with them and transmit our the science and the findings of ocean decay. Regarding promote equitable education, we are drafting the first training activity on coastal resilience. That will be a collaboration among the University of Bologna and some other important global institutions. And regarding the last strategic objective of all the environmental justice for coastal communities, we are performing a literature review on coastal resilience and environmental justice, collecting a series of papers that we are going to share on our website together with the audience, and of course will also be collected and available through the Knowledge Hub for Coastal Resilience. And in addition to these four main objectives, we have some cross-cutting activities. The Global South Coast, the community of practice on coastal ecosystem and community resilience, cities with the ocean, the Global Coast Experiment, and the Ocean Decay Vision. I want to start from the Ocean Decay Vision 2030, increase the resilience to coastal hazard, since this is a collaborative effort between all the DCCs of the decade and the DCOs of the ocean decade. So considering the 10 challenges of the ocean decade, we have been divided into working groups, 10 working groups, and we are involved, of course, in the working groups number 6, that is building community resilience to coast to ocean hazards, that is coordinated by Professor Nadia Pinardi and Professor Srinivasa Kumar of the DCC Indian Ocean region. And together with a panel, an international panel of experts, we are drafting this white paper that will be presented in April during the Ocean Decade conference that will be hosted in Barcelona in mid-April 2024. So we are investigating all the aspects of coastal resilience and of risk reduction, because as stated in the last global assessment report of the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, as you can see here at the bottom of the slide, disasters are reversing global development. There is an urgent action and is needed to build resilience into every decision we make. So there is resilience is I read the report, and resilience is really a keyword that embrace and is, we can find the spread all over the document. So in different environments, and especially in the coast, regarding the coast. So another cross-cutting activities we are dealing with is cities with the ocean. So the DCC-CRs contribute to the city with the ocean, as these cities are a key location for solving resilient problems where most of the population lives and will live in the future. So we are, as I said previously, we are developing a knowledge hub for coastal resilience that will help coastal cities to connect to the decade action, assess coastal cities needs, and develop marine science toolbox. At this regard, we have also proposed a town hall at the site of ocean science. That is a very important conference that will be held in New Orleans on February 18th, 23 in 2024. So take note of these dates. So going on with the community of practice, we are involved in this group on the topic of coastal ecosystem community resilience. We have so far 155 members in this group. And the aim of this group is to foster the dialogue on specific topics, including those falling under the following themes that are community engagement, place and culture, coastal ecosystem and resilience, socioeconomic and governance issues. Okay, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, this is not an open access group, but it is a working group only for ocean decade action members that are involved in the ocean decade. Moving to the global coast, this is a very important activities to mention, and it is organized within the global coast, the Decade Coast Predict program. That is a program of the decade, ocean decade directly. So what are we going to do in the global coast? We are going to demonstrate a fit-for-purpose coastal observing and forecasting system that will deliver innovative products and services for coastal resilient collaboration with local stakeholders. We contributed to set up this activity, and will be responsible for the stakeholder engagement in some pilot sites where we will test application of innovative technologies for coastal services. So in this pilot, we are collecting through a survey, and I invite you to candidate your pilot sites through the link you can see in this slide, taking into consideration that the deadline is the 4th of October. You can candidate your pilot, and in all the pilot sites there will be, we will perform different and innovative forecasting techniques, where in order to fill the gap that is highlighted, and in order to allow the local communities to have a series of coastal services that are really important for them in order to manage their own activity. So take note of these important activities. So what is next? We are organizing a workshop sharing best practices in the sustainable management of coastal environments that will be held here in Bologna in mid-December 2023, and together with local stakeholders, regional, national, and also international members of our program committee. Then in February, we will be involved in what I said previously in the event, in the conference in New Orleans. And we have submitted a proposal for a town hall meeting. And finally, we will be present in Barcelona from the 8th to the 12th of April for sharing together with all the other actors of the ocean decade our findings and collaborate and work together. So get in touch. We are here together with the other DCCs and DCO. We are ready to contribute to the sustainable development goals of the UNESCO-IOC. Here you can see two QR codes that I will be pleased if you can connect with us through engaged with us through our website, and also to keep you informed through our newsletter. So please sign. And this was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this nice overview of our DCC. I will then ask now Emma to share her screen. Emma is the Ocean Decade Network Manager, and she is working with the Ocean Decade Coordination Unit, which is the main that coordinates all of this global endeavor. Emma, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that now. So yes, hi everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here representing the Decade Coordination Unit. So my name is Emma Needham. I'm the Ocean Decade Network Manager. So I'm the go-to within the coordination unit for all things Ocean Decade Network, and I will explain what that is in a moment. And the other part of my role is the focal point within the unit for our decentralized coordination structures. So these are our Decade Collaborative Centers, Decade Coordination Offices, and Decade Implementing Partners. And I will explain more about what all of these things are. But yeah, today, what I'm mainly going to be doing is giving an overview of the decade and how our Decade Collaborative Centers, such as the Coastal Resilience DCC, sort of fit into the decade, and how you can access the community of practice that they manage as well. So to move on to my first slide. So many of you will already be familiar with the decade, but just to give a real overview. So the Ocean Decade was launched in January 2021 and will run through until the end of 2030. And the decade is really a convening framework for a wide range of stakeholders across the world to engage and collaborate outside of their normal communities to create essentially a sustainable ocean. And it is being implemented by our Decade Actions. So these are tangible initiatives carried out across the globe. And this infographic here gives a bit of a snapshot about where we are with the Decade Actions. So these are growing all the time as we put out twice yearly calls for Decade Actions. So that's the next one will open on the 15th of October, and we've just had one close. So you can see from this graphic that we currently have 277 projects, and these are coordinated by our 47 programs. We have, I mentioned our Decade Implementing Partners and Decade Collaborative Centers and Coordination Offices, and these numbers are building all the time as well. And I will, go on to explain a bit more about them. So in terms of how we're coordinating the decade, so my role is based within the Decade Coordination Unit, based within the IOC UNESCO Secretariat. So we're the central hub managing the day-to-day sort of operations and implementation of the decade. So we have teams based around operations and communications and resource mobilization. And so we're the ones kind of doing all the day-to-day operations, but we couldn't do it without our decentralized coordination structures. So these are organizations with regional and thematic expertise who sort of apply to do these roles. And we find that this approach is really crucial to ensure that the decade is relevant within these regional and thematic areas, and that the people and the organizations with the right knowledge and the right networks are coordinating the decade in these areas. So the main functions of DCCs, which is Decade Collaborative Centers, and DCOs, Decade Coordination Offices, is to catalyze and coordinate decade actions focused on either one of the 10 decade challenges or on an ocean basin or land-based region. And so the ultimate aim is to have a full coordinated matrix of DCCs and DCOs covering all of those major themes and geographies, and operating in a way that enhances collaboration and avoids overlap. So from this little graphic here, you can see the DCCs and DCOs that we currently have in place. So the only difference between these two different types of coordinating structure is that the coordination offices are led by UN entities and collaborative centers are not. But otherwise they fill exactly the same role. And so each of these offices or centers come with a small team of dedicated staff and some operational resources, and as sort of some of the main roles that they play are to as I said, to coordinate and catalyze decade programs and related decade projects. They also carry out communications and outreach. They support resource mobilization and capacity development for the decade actions that they're working with. They engage stakeholders, and importantly, they're in close contact always with us at the Decade Coordination Unit and with the other DCCs and DCOs. And they also are the people who manage the community of practice that corresponds to their relevant theme or region. So in addition to these structures, we also have Decade implementing partners. So these are organizations that give some targeted support to some aspect of the Decade implementation. They all, the types of support they all give vary. And we also have national Decade committees who help us to implement the Decade on a national level. So I mentioned communities of practice, or COPs, as one of the key functions of, or coordinating functions of our DCCs and DCOs. So communities of practice are spaces for members of endorsed Decade actions to collaborate and share ideas around their specific theme or topic. And the aim is to have a community of practice in place for all of the 10 Decade challenges and all of the ocean basins. And yeah, as I mentioned, where there's a Decade Collaborative Centre or Decade Coordination Office in place, such as with the Coastal Resilience Decade Collaborative Centre, they're the ones that who manage the community of practice. And we have a virtual space for all of these communities of practice on the Ocean Decade Network. And if you haven't already been on the Ocean Decade Network, it is an online platform that we use to engage people with the Ocean Decade. And it's a space where you can connect with people across a really wide range of ocean expertise. And it's inclusive to anyone who wants to get involved. So the content is user-driven, like social media platforms, and you can use it to network with our nearly 7,000 users, both by using our public feed where you can share information with everyone, or through, we have a directory where you can find individuals by using the search function, who you might want to approach about certain projects. We also have the groups section as well, which is contains lots of different groups. Some of the groups are communities of practice, some of them are open groups, some are working groups just for specific areas of the Decade. But yeah, would recommend going in and taking a look around, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of groups that of interest to you all. And if you don't find a group that you think would be useful, you are also welcome to apply to create a group, and there's information about how to do that in the resources section on the network. So in addition to the sort of networking aspect, you can also view our Decade actions. They each have a page on there, so you can learn a bit about what they're all doing. You can also use the Take Action page, which is where you will find all of the information about how to submit Decade actions for endorsement. So if you have a project that you're working on that you'd like to submit to the next call for Decade actions, this is the place to do it. And yeah, it's just a great place to sort of share anything that you've been working on that you want to get out there to the ocean community. So if you're not already on there, if you go to forum.oceandecade.org, you can fill out the sign up form there, and then once you've done that, we will send you an activation email, and it's important to click that link and activate your account before you'll actually get access to everything. It sometimes goes into your junk or spam folder, so take a look in there if you can't find it. And yeah, once you're on there as well, I would just recommend going to the resources section and checking out the handy user guides and PDF tutorials we have in there for various aspects of engaging with the network. So in terms of how to find the coastal ecosystem and community resilience community of practice, if you go to groups, thematic communities of practice, and then you'll see the coastal ecosystem and community resilience COP, and you just click I think it's request to join, and you'll be prompted to include both your the name and ID of the Decade action that you're working on, and then that just allows the DCC to easily admit you into the group. And yeah, it's sort of like the groups are kind of like a mini version of the overall network, so they have a lot of the same features, but it's just for the members of your group. So you can use this to make announcements or share information with the other members of the group. You can, and also, yeah, crucially, the DCC can use it to share information with you. There's the events section, so there's, yeah, they'll highlight the more webinars that are to come, I'm sure, in there. There's the media center, so that's for any documentation related to the community of practice. And yeah, just a nice way for you to kind of engage and stay up to date with the activities. So I think that's it from me. But yeah, as I said, would recommend that you sign up to the Ocean Decade Network if you haven't already. And if you have any questions about anything, of course, I'm here now, or you can contact me anytime at oceandecadenetwork@unesco.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. It was very full of very useful information, and I hope many of you now will be inspired and motivated to join us in the UN Ocean Decade Network. So I would then now go ahead with Vivianne's presentation. So Vivianne Solis-Weiss, she's an oceanographer at the Institute of Marine Sciences and Limnology at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And she's leading the Decade Endorsed Action Integrated Coastal Management Initiative as a measure of adaptation to climate change. I will share my screen so that you can see the presentation.
Okay.
You
can see me because I cannot see you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you see
are
the
you on the
presentation?
first slide? Because I cannot see you.
I'm sorry about that. Let's try again. How about that?
Okay. Are you on the first slide?
Yes.
Okay. So here is the name of the project accepted by the ONU UNESCO Decade for the Oceans 2020-2030 that we're going to take about today, and it has ID 10 because it was endorsed quite early in this. In all these actions that were taken by ONU and UNESCO. So we are going to talk here about resilience and adaptation, mostly resilience because we have as objectives to recover both the resilience of all the ecosystem affected by the climate change that are all affected negatively and the adaptations that can be promoted. We have here the list of all the coral reefs, grasses, and beaches and dunes that we have in the Mexican Caribbean. And in the next slide, we talk about the adaptation, which is when it's impossible to return to the pristine conditions, we have to determine the measures to be taken to adapt to the climate change-induced new normality. They call it euphemistically new normality because they cannot call it a catastrophe ongoing, but that's the way it is, and that's the way in the slide that it looks like when the sargassum hits. So the organization and its partner are here in this slide that we lead, as Sarah said, in the Institute of Marine Science and Limnology, and we have all the institutions involved there in the lower squares. We are a group of academics, government institutions, social partners, private stockholders, and not yet including the hotels as also private stockholders. But we have here, as you see, the 4 branches that we are concentrating on. And in the research and monitoring, of course, you can see most of the academic organization that belong to the University of University of Mexico and also others. In ecosystem restoration, also you have a lot of people from the academic world. And instead in socializing and linking, we have 2 people from consulting companies. And in ecosystem restoration at the bottom, we have also the government agencies that deal with the sea in general. And in the last one, we have especially people from private companies who work with either technological designs of for maybe vehicles to collect sargassum or to dispose of it, people that are specialists in disposal of garbage and all these kind of things. So in the next slide, we can see that why we are doing that. We took at first this new problem, relatively new problem of the Sargasso massive arrivals to our coast. And why did we do that? Because they affect seriously not only all the coastal ecosystem we have, but no one knew in 2015, when we had the first big alert, what was hitting us. We didn't know the magnitude, its characteristics, how it would evolve with time. And we knew it was already affecting seriously our tourism-based economy. And we thought that the public outcry would help to get financing, in which we were not successful up to now. And this is one of our big drawbacks, is that we don't have enough financings to get to do all the things we want in this project. So in this case, in the next slide, we see how we can intend to apply the integral management of the coastal zone. And in short, what we have to do is to answer all the questions that are here, beginning with what it is and where does it come from. So in the next, I will not dedicate my time to explain what is a sargassum, since it will be addressed in another talk maybe sometime, but I will take it as an example of how we apply the integrated management approach to this problem that can be equally applied to the other existing coastal ecosystems that we have and that we will study in the frame of this initiative. But I will only say here that the sargassum is definitely a result of the global climate change, not in its very existence, which has always been there. However, yes, in the part of its massive reproduction rate and dispersal, because we now have, as you can see in this slide, that the Sargasso Sea, which was the original only place where Sargasso came from, now we have a second Sargasso Sea here in the lower part of the slide, where we have a new Sargassum Sea going from one side to the Atlantic to the other, from Africa to Brazil. So in the next slide, we try to answer, where does it go? Where does it come from and where does it go? To know where does it go, we mean in our Mexican, Caribbean, and in our shores. So our problem was how to detect it when it approaches our coast, and because that's the first part of controlling it. So we have on the white square all the tools that we now have to know where it goes, why it crashes or not on our shores, and which shore, which beach it will arrive to, and how much to expect and when. All that we got with all the photos, videos, radio signals, and the high computer power that we have in the university, so that we can make models to generate early warnings of its arrival, especially where, because we have more than 200 kilometers of coast to take care of. So in the next slide, we can see how we do it more graphically. I selected here two pictures from NOAA, satellite early warning, that we use on a daily basis, more or less. And we also are helped with small planes, which are from the Navy, which is government, which lend us time for doing this. We have drones that are from our institutes, they are from the academic side, and we want to experiment with aerostatic or hot air balloons that we can be sent either from shore or from a ship that would be in high seas. So with this, we can monitor and have early warnings of what happens in high seas, but we also collect data close to shore, as we see in the next slide, because we can see here how in small planes we take also pictures and videos on how the patches of Sargasso are advancing in the sea, well, in our shores, or getting close and closer until they crash. And on the right side, we have part of what we are developing as models to have the idea of where to find with current studies and topohydrography data to produce high-resolution modelings of the coastline. So we have some results already in early warning. Our Institute of Geography is taking care of the satellite data, compilation and processing, which will end up in good forecasting, trying to imitate at the local basis what is done by the NASA. Also, we have our institute, in fact, nested in our peer, the SAMO, which means Academic Service of Meteorological and Oceanographic Monitoring, which takes oceanographic parameters on an hourly basis, so we can have in real time what is going on from some parameters like temperature, pressure of seawater and air. And that also helps a lot. The Atmospheric Science Institute is taking care of the physical part of the project. And what they do is collect data and treat it so that they can produce the models that we saw and that we will see right now. And in the one, which is another university, we have a geologist who does a topohydrography, and it helps with the modeling of the currents that are going around. So in the next slide, we see that those mathematical models are produced like the ones we see here. To the left is the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, and the way the water is flowing, so that we can know where if a certain patch is in high seas, if it will land and where, following the arrows. And in the right side, we have some like a close-up of the other one, also with the arrows that indicate how the water will drift. Okay, so in the next slide, we now try to say what happens when the sargassum reaches the shores. And what happens is exactly what you are seeing now, which is brown tides rotting at the beach in the right side, the brown part of it, and turbidity. That is what we get when the sargassum gets close to shore. And what are the short and long-term effects of these arrivals? So in the next slide, we can see that the ones I have listed here, we are not all, but as I said, I am choosing from our results what is the most important thing to present it shortly. The first thing is that tourism is severely affected, and we depend on it maybe at 90% of our economy. Aesthetically, because as you saw in the other slides, the beaches and the shallow water are totally ruined. And we have also very foul smells released by the production of sulfuric acid when it rots. Toxicity for humans, because of the release of that gas, when exposed daily, can be very severe. And in Martinique, they have already found that it can cause also death. We have also damage to electronic devices on land, like televisions and cell phones and so on. We have massive deaths of marine organisms that are around, that means in shallow water. We have also erosion of the beaches and removal of sand which adheres to the plant when we try to remove it from the beach. Inland pollution is also a big concern because the sargassum is discarded in the jungle clandestinely and wherever the bus or the transportation the hotels hire will take it, and they just discard it in the middle of the jungle. So in the next slide, we can see more graphically what happens when we collect the sargassum by hand here in this first to the left, the erosion it provokes, also high up, the pollution inland when it is discarded, when it rots and all the leachates are going down the karstic soil. The turbidity it provokes also in shallow water, and we have also high mortality either of fish or other organisms, as we can see there. In the next slide, we see that the other question is, what can we do to stop the damage done? So it's very difficult, but the fact is that it has to be collected at sea, preferably in high seas, but that we have not yet begun to address it because of the cost of the experiments we have to do. I presented our idea of that experiment in the last Oslo meeting in Mallorca, but we still cannot find the financing to do it. But instead, we have begun to experiment with barriers. We, of course, do not fabricate these barriers because they are taken on the model of the barriers that they take for oil contention. And depending on what kind of beach we can have different models, as we can see here. And what we are doing is that we are very much involved with a company that builds or fabricates the best barrier that we could find. And we are helping them decide what or how to implement their models so that they can be more effective. And also several hotels are already trying them, as well as government in public beaches. We have different designs, and that solution is limited in space and has to be, well, in space as we see here in the back and to the left, that when the barrier finishes, the sargassum will pass freely, of course, but it passes only when we have either high waves, or if we have bad weather conditions, we have to take the barriers away because otherwise they will be broken. These barriers have to be accompanied by sargassum collector boats, as we see in this slide. They look like that. They're called sargaceras in Spanish, and they have to be moving quite fast to the side of the barrier where the sargassum accumulates. They collect the sargassum and crush it before they bag it and send it to shore. However, whatever we do, let's see in the next slide, some sargassum will reach the shore, either because it passes the barrier, because there are no barriers, because we couldn't collect it in the water before it beaches, and so it will reach shore, and we have to collect it because, as I said, in the beach, it can only rot and cause more damage. So this is what not to do. You see here very large amounts like we got in 2018, but in general, we have bad events of sargassum arrival. So what not to do is to collect it by hand, first of all, because it will cause many health problems to those who are collecting it. And also it will remove a lot of sand and beach elements that will erode all the beaches. And this is a big problem in the Mexican Caribbean, because we tend to have the beach disappearing and we have to add sand constantly. Also, another thing not to do is to use heavy equipment, heavy tractors to collect it, because it will compact the beach and also erode it more efficiently than other things. So in the next slide, we see now the last question that we have to deal with is, what do we do it in the end? What will we do when we have collected the sargassum, which has arrived to us? So there are already disposal places. Well, first we have to bag it, to pack it, to collect it in some way. When we collect it with sand, we try to wash it and then transport it with those trucks until their final disposal places. We have already disposal places with biomembranes and well equipped for this kind of residues or garbage. We have not yet decided what it is, but they are few and clearly insufficient, so that we intend to construct operatively functional disposal centers with the, of course, biomembrane to protect the karstic soil and prevent the contamination of our underwater system, which is in fact our only water reserve in the Yucatan Peninsula. So it's very important that we take care of that, because in the jungle disposal that I was talking about first, that it penetrates the soil and pollutes the underwater system. So what we do first is and one of the companies, which is a private stockholder that works with us, is trying to put in place more of these disposal places. So what we want to do is to find a way to restitute value to the residues we collected and transform them in useful products, and maybe commercialize them and earn some money from that, like the one we are listed here to the left, and the new ideas that everyone can come up with, from making notebooks with that, or shoe soles, or crafts, or whatever. And besides the fact that we want to fabricate sustainable energy like biogas and biofuel, except that it doesn't come out in the high quality that we would like to. So all these actions could result in resilience and to recover those ecosystems that we are now losing because of these massive arrivals of sargassum. So we are involved also in the rehabilitation of coral beaches and dunes. Most of us in the academic world are doing scientific research, specialized monitoring, and evaluation of the ecosystem impacts, so that we can address all that we need to know to restore to their pristine condition all the ecosystems that are damaged now, which are the corals, the seagrasses, and the beaches themselves. However, the real situation today is absolutely terrible. We have a national coral bleaching alert, which I personally sent to the government, which is now in the press in Mexico, because we witnessed in September of 2023, which is a month ago, these photos taken by Lorenzo Alvarez Philip, which they will probably then work with. And we see that about 80% of the corals are dead, but totally dead, totally white. And this is not because of the sargassum, but it's also because of the climate change and the warming of the seas. We have here in this slide how the temperature has changed 40 years from now and until today. And we can see that it has only been increasing, and that is really lethal. It causes a high mortality in corals. And we have also our own data that we can see here, which is not as good as with the NOAA, but we are advancing. And we can see here how the abnormalities of heat are continuing. And in red, we have the data from 2023, and the gray lines are the average of the temperatures in other years before this one. So you can see that the situation is quite bad also there, and we have to address it. We took this picture, well, I took it to show it to you to end my presentation, where we can see that in Quintana Roo, which is this state here, which encloses all the Caribbean, the Mexican Caribbean, we have already bleaching alerts to their maximum. In the right side of the slide, you can see the arrows, which are not very visible because they are in the dark red region of them, which means that the situation is at its worst it has ever been. And in the second part of the slide, we have the level of alert that is provoked by this warming of the seas. And we can see here that in 2023, it got now in these last 2 months to the worst level it has ever been by far. So we have combining situations which are adding to the damage done to our ecosystems, and the work we have to do is huge. We have as a big drawback that the government and other agencies doesn't want to help financially, so that we have to work with our own money, which is a lot of problems because we don't have enough to address all the problems. And this is the end of the presentation. We have here the Mexican partners, the university, our institute, which is the second logo, and the private companies and the stockholders. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vivianne. This was a very nice presentation full of a lot of interesting results. And you also highlighted very well the urgency of the situation that relates to the sargassum. I know we are now a little bit over time. We're just about 5 o'clock here in European time. I was still hoping to see if we can get some questions. I hope many of you got them answered by our speakers already. And I wanted to just read to Vivianne, who just finished presenting, that Kayla Blake was highlighting that we're having these problems in Jamaica with the large deposit of sargassum on our shores. There was some research into value-added products from sargassum. However, the buy-in from the market is low. Maybe you want to comment on this, Vivianne, also based on your experience.
Yeah, the last part I didn't hear. The last part, it says that, well, I understood that it is in Jamaica and all that, but what was the final part?
That there was some research into value-added products from sargassum, but the buy-in from the market is low. So I don't know if you had any experience with that, or if you wanted to comment on this highlight from Kayla.
Yes, yes. It's very difficult because we have not found a good and commercializing way to dispose of it. My favorite solution was to build blocks, for building houses. And I think that would have been a very good idea, except for the fact that the sargassum on its way from the Brazil, or even before that, to our shores and passing by Jamaica and all the Caribbean, also absorbs heavy metals. So they will be incorporated to anything we do with the sargassum. So either we have to analyze each batch of sargassum that gets to these disposal places, and then if they don't have heavy metals, we can use them very, very well for building blocks, which is, as I said, my favorite solution, because we will always need building blocks. Of course, they are mixed with concrete, and we will always have a need for housing. It's a low-income housing, though, so it could be very profitable as an idea. It is the best I know, but unfortunately, we have that of the problem of the heavy metals. And what happens in our countries, which are tropical, is that we have a lot of sun, and then the metals will get back to the air and will pollute and will poison the people who are living in those areas.
Thank you. There was just one other question from Marco Piano. There appears to be potential for crossover of sargassum collection in the high seas with ocean cleanups, garbage, and plastic collection efforts. Do you know if there is the possibility in your region maybe for this crossover, or if this can be a solution indeed?
Yes. We are thinking very much of collecting in high seas. That would be the best. you know, we get about 2 or 4% of what is produced in the high seas, and the sargassum will go back to the sargassum sea as it's normal for it. However, what is diverted by winds and currents is what we get, and it's already sometimes 2,000 tons that we get in one season. So, no, and more than that. So, what we would prefer, and we are entering that area, is to collect in high seas. I presented in the ASO an experiment that we want to do just before doing it for sure, because what we intend is to collect it at high seas, but not to take it back to the shore, but to dispose of it in high seas. And we have to know why. We want to maybe reduce it by grinding it and then sink it so that it can disperse in very large areas of real deep bottoms. That will be great if it functions, but we need money to do an experiment and not throw the sargassum in high seas like, you know, irresponsibly without knowing really what will happen to it.
Thank you very much, Vivianne, once again for your presentation, and also thanks to all other speakers for being here and presenting us a lot of nice information and results about the ocean decade and what is happening around it. I would just take the opportunity to share with you also that we have 2 more webinars coming up. Indeed, the next one will be on the 19th of October at 17 CEST, and it will be Riding the Waves of Resilience, Empowering Coastal Communities. The topic will be around how to best engage local communities with the science and the scientific endeavors that we are carrying out. And we will hear from 2 different experiences coming from our community of science, community of practice. So tune in for that. We have our events on our website, so you can register in that and you will receive some more notification about it. And the 3rd webinar will happen on the 14th of November, and we will hear from 2 of the AXA fellow that received some funding for their research on coastal livelihoods. So we will focus on how coastal resilience actually is a lot about multidisciplinary approaches, and how to tackle this topic needs to come from different angles. And then once again, in saying goodbye to you all, I would like to remind you to visit our website. We just revamped it, and it's now fancier than ever. So please take a chance to visit it and browse it. We have a dedicated page on how you can engage with us. So please check it out. We also have a newsletter. So if you want to receive some notification about what we're doing and our next meetings, for example, please consider registering. And just now we opened also a YouTube channel where we will also upload the recording of this webinar. So once again, thank you all very much for being here with us this afternoon, morning, evening. And I hope to see many of you also in our next webinars. And thanks again to our speakers and CMCC for the support here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.